Show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. Welcome to February 1st, 2016. Wow, how rapidly time flies when we're occupied looking backwards at how do we resolve the issues that we've really actually allowed to be created just because we believed that we were being protected by our military, by the Department of Energy, by the EPA. And frankly, our generation, I think starting with my generation, I'm 60, and I think about 5 years, we got a huge wake-up call that woke up a lot of people. The earthquake in Japan not only caused the tsunami and had created the nuclear volcano that we have going on, but somehow 5 years ago, a lot of things happened and people really began to wake up. As you know, on Mondays, I have adopted the cause of St. Louis, of letting America know and the world know that St. Louis is an ongoing, unmitigated, unprecedented nuclear disaster that we have not seen anywhere on the planet ever. And because this one has been created by sheer gross neglect and made worse by continuing bureaucracy and a lack of complacency for the urgency and the health and the welfare of the people of St. Louis. I have picked this up because I believe that it is a catastrophe of untold statements yet. It is a slow unfolding, but it is happening. And so every Monday I have on the radio citizens of St. Louis who can share with us information because it is impossible. Over the weekend, I was really attempting to do some research to find out what's going on in St. Louis. And guess what? On the West Coast, I could not find nothing beyond January 5th. So today we have on the radio with us Wendy Lumetta. She's a citizen activist that comes on regularly with us. And she has agreed to fill in very last minute. Drew Kuhn from the Missouri Accountability Project had an emergency that he had to tend to, so he is not with us this morning. We'll reschedule him when he gets finished with his business. But Wendy last minute agreed to join us, so I want to bring her in right away. Wendy, please, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lonnie, for having me. It's wonderful to speak to you again, and thank you again for continuing to advocate for St. Louis. We really feel kind of like a lost cause in the middle of the country here. We understand that the methane leak in California is a horrendous proportion. The Fukushima disaster continues to plague the entire world. And yet here we are in our little microcosm that is still feeling the effects from World War II war weapons waste. So we really appreciate you giving us the platform to speak about it in a public context. So
I think that your statement of gratitude really speaks to what is wrong with America and what is wrong with the fourth arm of our government, and that is the journalists in this country. I don't care if General Electric owns our media or Fox News owns our media, and they're the same players that own the nuclear industry. This is a human catastrophe and a worldwide catastrophe that they're acting as if it's just not that big a deal. This is this thing I'm stunned about. It's like, I was really kind of angry over the weekend when I know that you guys had hearings and meetings. I've been reading about them on the Westlake landfill page. So I was expecting to find at least a few stories on the research, without digging too far, going directly into St. Louis. That was kind of my mission, not to go into the St. Louis news media, but find things on the outside of it. There is no reporting. So could you tell us what is going on in St. Louis? What kinds of meetings do you know about, and if there's any movement, or what are we waiting for?
What we're waiting for, I don't think we're waiting. I think people that have been so-called tossing the nuclear hot potato down the road for literally decades, those are the people whose hands the decision is in, and we are kind of stranded and at a loss for knowing what to do other than to continue to contact our electeds. We continue to appeal to our federal electeds, and the governor, Nixon, still has not responded to the 13,000 signature petition that has been delivered to him. And so it's going to really take some outside help. I also just want to say, in a non-passive way, the disaster that happened in Flint, Michigan, we're so sorry and regretful, and this seems indicative of the infrastructure of our nation and the way that the politicians seem to be handling it. They don't want to spend any money for it, and then this is what happens when something like that is so avoidable, that we need help at Westlake to avoid a catastrophe like the one that was similar to the one in Flint. So
I'm sorry, but Wendy, I think that you guys have a catastrophe that is worse than Flint. I mean, it's there. It's like you guys get flooded out all the time. People live right next door to a nuclear dump site that's leaching into the environment that has a half-life of 700,000 years.
Yep, but the EPA has been able to scientifically explain that away due to, background levels or due to...
That's a false argument. You know what? Any good scientist, and if you guys... I understand that Dr. Helen Caldicott is coming your way. On February 20th, there is going to be, I don't know if you can announce what that is, but some type of a symposium or a hearing or something where Dr. Caldicott will go. Ask her specifically, how do we confront this? How do we respond to the EPA when they start trying to throw that garbage down our throats? Because logically, we know it's a pack of lies. What you guys don't have is the language to refute them. This is one of the things that Patty Amino did, and this is how she was able to stand up to them. She understood, she was able to talk back to them in their language, and this is what we have to get good at. That's what I think. We need to be able to understand, wait a minute, that background, from my understanding, the background radiation is a different kind of radiation that our bodies assimilate. We're not taught, you cannot compare apples to oranges. You can't compare natural radiation with man-made isotopes. Because so this is an example of the man-made natural rate. This is how they can, do you understand the analogy about fish?
The analogy about fish, I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that.
John Goffman gives this analogy about fish in his book, Poison Power, and it really brings it home how they mix this conversation up, natural radiation and man-made radiation. So fish live in the ocean and they need potassium. And there's not very much potassium in the ocean. So they swim around, and as they're swimming through, they're absorbing this minute amounts of potassium. But in order for them to thrive, they need potassium. So their bodies, they have biologically transformed. So now their bodies can magnetize trace amounts of potassium 1,000 times in their bodies. So when they get a little tiny bit of potassium, and becomes, now our bodies also need potassium. That's a man-made that's a natural occurring isotope. We need potassium. That's why eating fish is good for us, gives us all kinds of nutrients, potassium being one of them, because they magnetize the potassium. Now, when fish is swimming in around in an ocean full of cesium-137 and 134, the nuclear volcano that's in Fukushima pouring out unprecedented amounts, of which those two isotopes are only two of thousands of isotopes pouring into the ocean. When a fish sees it, because it's kind of the same family of potassium, cesium is of the same family of isotopes. When a fish sees that cesium-134 or 137, it thinks it's potassium. So it magnetizes the cesium-137 and 134 1,000 times. This is why every tuna that they tested out of the Pacific Ocean now has cesium-134 in it and 137. Every one.
Isn't that sad?
And that is why, and now cesium-137 is a man-made isotope. It is something that comes out of these nuclear volcanoes. Fukushima is the first nuclear volcano we've ever had, although I think St. Louis is kind of a nuclear volcano. I think it's on the magnitude of Fukushima. That's what I think. Because when you look at the harm that it's causing, it's off the charts in your town. But that's a second issue. But this is the point here. It's not the same. Man-made radiation is not the same as naturally occurring radiation. And this is a false argument. And you guys when they say that to you, you need to back them down and say, that is not true. Our bodies do not handle man-made radiation the same as naturally occurring radiation. It is true.
Well,
we need naturally occurring radiation. And all radiation, this is the thing on the argument, all radiation causes harm. That's what John Goffman in his book, Poison Power, talked about this. All radiation causes harm. We know that. That's why, as doctors and physicians, they know we're going to have some naturally occurring cancers and birth defects, because those are the things that it causes.
I understand. That's very troubling, to say the least. Actually, St. Louis has a legacy of also, when they were doing the above-ground nuclear testing, they dumped strontium-90 from the air onto St. Louis, and then they had what was termed the St. Louis Baby Tooth Project, where St. Louis children would mail in their baby tooth, and they would measure the amount of strontium-90 that measured in their teeth, because it fit as a calcium receptor. So this is also part of St. Louis's nuclear legacy.
I'll bet you 2 to 1 Dr. Caldecott knows very much about that. I hope you ask her about that when she arrives, because
about the St. Louis Baby Tooth Survey. I'm certain she does know, because it's part of the nuclear legacy. So
yes, and it's her forte. Like, she really did look at children. That was like the thing that got her. I remember hearing her speak, like, because she was a mother, because she was a physician. It just was like it wrenched at her heart. This is what got her on this path.
Right.
Wow.
Yep, I have read her story, and I have also, in my non-experienced or professional expertise way, have read into some of the information regarding what they term as the linear no threshold limit to radiation, and to something called hormesis.
Right.
And those things are just, they are ways to, what they are environmental laws, words meant to harm people, and they do harm people, because everyone knows that.
Were the people in St. Louis, I wasn't talking to you guys at the time, but the NRC recently, in fact, we should look this up. The NRC said that they're going to make a decision about they have been asked by some scientists for the nuclear industry to change their basis of how they measure it, to go from no linear threshold to the hormesis threshold. And I was encouraging my listeners to comment on the NRC website. They closed their comments, I think, in November 19th. But were you guys commenting on that in St. Louis? Were you aware of this?
Oh, yes. We most definitely were aware. At least people that are directly involved in advocating for this issue. I hope that everyone was aware, and I hope that everyone understands the importance of that, because when you say, we'll just tell the people that, that you're not going to accept that explanation for background radiation, well, it's really not that simple. It's already worked into the Missouri Health and Senior Services paperwork, so that they don't give you the true reading. They give you the reading based on what they feel is the background, plus this is, your reading. So the language for the reports is very manipulative, and it's consumed in red tape through the government, and that is something that makes it a really difficult battle, because there's just so much paperwork and so many details involved with all of the different agencies and tossing that nuclear hot potato. Nobody wants to take responsibility for it. So to me, in my house where I was brought up, if there was a spill on the floor, you cleaned it up. It didn't matter who did it. It didn't matter if whose fault it was or anything like that. If you see the mess, then it's your responsibility to just go ahead and clean that up. So what we have here is greedy people that have never taken their, big boy and big girl pants on and said, I'm going to do the right thing for these people, as opposed to just leaving this here. Instead, we've just had a consistent, it's just been criminally negligent. That's
I have to say, this makes me think that this is why Governor Nixon refuses to acknowledge the 12,000 signatures. Because in Flint, Michigan, it took practically the entire, look how long it took Governor Snyder to acknowledge the problem. After children were dying, the whole entire town was being sickened.
Right.
Not just 10%, not just 5%, but the whole thing just went to hell in a handbasket. You know what I mean? Like, and then he was like, oh, wow, then we got everybody involved. Do you understand what I'm like? They really do require the dead corpses, as John Goffman would say. They do require to see dead bodies before they will take in the energy. He says it's not just the nuclear industry either. It's the entire energy and technology philosophy that was adopted. It's not just nuclear. The problem with nuclear is it makes everything else worse, and it's so catastrophic for. It destroys all life. That's essential. This is what the hormesis theory, this is the scary part. They're trying to sell us this idea that believing that radiation is bad for you is an incorrect thought.
It's terrible that people, the reality is they know that it's here and that there's no way around it, and there's no way to account for all of it. So they're going to have to, be able to explain it in a way that will allow them to have deniability when it comes to responsibility.
So, I don't know, Wendy, call me the eternal optimist, but I really believe that responsibility looks forward, blame looks backwards. And once these people who are in charge and the scientists can get over the trauma of knowing the harm that they have caused through their sheer neglect and forgive themselves and honestly say, okay, let's put our minds to resolving this. Let's figure out there's sound energy. They have molecular energy. They know quantum physics. I can't, honestly, in my heart of hearts, I really believe that it's going to be some off the chart, like sound energy or light energy or something that'll change the molecules to help it heal itself. Like mushrooms, I read this article that said mushrooms basically are like a subcomputer, and they can go into the dirt and they put it into their little brains, and then they develop whatever it is that needs to regenerate the dirt, like they're healers of the planet, like that kind of thing. They have completely denied all of it. They just want to, I don't know. I don't get the thinking of why they plan on killing so many people. That's what it seems like.
Well, it just seems like as long as there is any way that they would be able to deny it, then that's what they're going to do. And then there's also a small factor of a cost-benefit analysis. Just like in car manufacturing, they have to determine whether enough, people's death is going to equal them having a recall or,
That's immoral. That's immoral. That's an immoral position to
immoral.
take. And for America's energy, I just read an article this morning that said the Senate just passed a bill, and we have to derail this. I think it's 2420. The Senate just passed a bill to promote nuclear energy in this country. We're going to rely on nuclear energy in this country, while we are denying the fact that for every nuclear power plant that happens, we produce per year 1,000 Hiroshima bombs in nuclear waste.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to drown in nuclear waste. We ought not to do one more nuclear thing until we have a solution for the waste, starting with St. Louis. Get busy. Start looking for the answers. They're going to invest $35 million to drill a hole in North Dakota to, quote, help Hanford. You know what helping Hanford means? Putting the waste in a hole in North Dakota.
I don't know what to say about that, because I don't know what the geologist or specialist would be thinking of, other than perhaps it's not in an aquifer that would affect people's drinking water. That's the major issue that I have regarding Westlake landfill, and the fact that it drains directly upstream of drinking water for the entire St. Louis region.
Yes, that's exactly right. For an entire state. How many people are in St. Louis, Wendy?
Well, yeah, we talked about this before. I'm not a very good historian.
I know. I looked it up. There's in the area that I could see, it looks like there's at least 300,000 people affected right there. I mean, immediately affected.
Right.
It's a highly populated. But that to me, you know what? This to me kind of explains why Jay Nixon is ignoring it. Because every governor who has become a governor there has had to know about this. So this is not a new problem. If he acknowledges it now, people are going to say, why didn't you acknowledge it 5 years ago? When you first got into office, however long it was, 6-7 years ago. I mean, that's exactly.
It's because of a legal term called plausible deniability, and as long as he can say that his advisors told him that it wasn't that bad, or that the EPA said there was really nothing wrong, then he can get away with not being criminally responsible for it. So that's why Governor Nixon hasn't done anything, because we can't hold his feet to the fire, so to say, and make him be the person responsible for it when he wasn't the person that that originated it. He just, once again, passed that nuclear hot potato on down the road.
But all he has to do is declare a state of emergency, and we get your city gets federal funds just like Flint does. Now, this was the interesting part about the Flint thing. Yeah, they have this $600 million as a piece of legislation going through Congress, but John Cornyn of Texas is like, wait a minute, I don't think we should pay for this. I think this is a Michigan problem. So this is the problem with what we have going on in our country. We have big business protecting big business. So we get the elected officials say look, maybe this is another reason why Governor Nixon will not do it. Because let's say he gets 100,000 people from your city demanding that he declare a state of emergency, and he does. And then they say, okay, we're going to bring things in. There are other legislators who can slow the train down because they're getting paid by the Republic Services, by the nuclear industry. Because let's be real. Right now, the Senate has passed. They actually passed a new bill that says we are going to heavily rely on nuclear as part of our future. These Gen 2 and Gen 3 nuclear power plants, we're going to put them out everywhere else we can without any regard to the catastrophe going on in your city, the harm that nuclear waste has already caused. And you guys talk about this being from World War II, but this is the very same waste that every nuclear power plant generates. It's the same, however, it's still plutonium is plutonium, right? So...
Well, except in our case where it's uranium. And specifically,
right.
When you're talking about the isotopes, we have uranium-235 here, which does not exist in the background. It only comes from the Shinkolobwe mine in the Belgian Congo, where they mined it back, in the day. So the only type of uranium that we have is the specific type here But besides that, we also have a real problem with thorium. It's thought to be the largest isolated spot of thorium, and that's on top of the fact that it's in a chemical, formerly municipal landfill that's on fire. So there's horrible realities to all of the different things. It's off-gassing benzene, it's off-gassing methane, it's off. They have toxic leachate, which spills occasionally out into the open, where basically the pipeline goes under the street, so it hooks up eventually to the Metropolitan Sewer District, where it goes upstream for drinking water for St. Louis.
Okay, so look, this is the thing. Plutonium comes from uranium-238. So it all drives from uranium, all of it. And then the thorium is actually, this is an interesting thing what it says about thorium. Thorium actually is part of the fuse cycle, right? It has, but what it does is it actually it creates uranium. Mm-hmm. So it's all about uranium. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. Thorium is what they need to work with this uranium, but then it creates. Okay, so this is what it says: replace with recycled uranium-233, so that on reaching equilibrium, 80% of the energy comes from the thorium. So they sort of work hand in hand. That's why you guys have thorium there, because they needed it to work together. And it is highly, before we move on, I wanted to get back to this thing that's going to happen with Dr. Caldicott. I'm very excited that you guys are able to bring her to St. Louis. Do you know anything about that event? Can you
Thank you. Me too. I sure do. It's I know that there is a very wonderful educator. Her name is Dr. Gwen Verhoff, and she probably had a hand in getting this going. It's on February 20th, which I believe is this Saturday. I don't have the time off the top of my head, but I know that the place is at St. Charles Community College in Wildwood. And what it is a first of all, it's part art exhibition. There is a photography gallery of the victims of Coldwater Creek and of the Westlake landfill, including very telling photographs where you can see quite obviously the dangerous toxins that are spewing into the air. It's a picture is worth 1,000 words. But there is also going to be Dr. Caldicott and a number of other speakers, of which I am sorry that I'm not familiar because I wasn't a participant in the arrangement of this scenario, but I know that I personally am very excited about seeing Dr. Caldicott. She's so knowledgeable. She is a principled and
here we go. I have it. I found it. It's from 6 to 9 o'clock on February 20th, and it's called The Atoms Next Door, a symposium on nuclear waste and occupational illness. Leading experts on radioactive waste will converge at STLCC Wildwood for a symposium that explores regional and global implications of nuclear weapons development. The event begins at 6 p.m. with a reception and art gallery exhibit featuring work inspired by the people of the community affected by nuclear waste. Kristen Camuso, photographer and founder of Humans of Westlake Landfill Facebook page, will be on hand to discuss her exhibited photographs. Jason Hargrove will also attend in conjunction with his own related exhibit, Contaminate St. Louis. Both work of artists will be on display at the Contemporary Arts at the college during the month of February. At 7 p.m., Dr. Helen Caldicott, an Australian physician, author, and internationally known advocate, will address the context and consequences of nuclear weapons production, especially for human health and environment. She will address the role of experts in helping the public understand technically complex hazards. This will include, in part, attention to the reinvigoration of Physicians for Social Responsibility, an organization comprising doctors committed to educating colleagues about the dangers of nuclear stockpiling, nuclear war, and environmental contamination. Wow, that's awesome.
Yes, very excited. And again, wanted to give a shout out to Dr. Gwen Burhoff. She's actually a professor there at the college, and she was recently in the film The Safe Side of the Fence, where she, I believe she's a history professor, and she had an interesting historical photograph that included information about the workings of the atomic bomb, and she also discussed Einstein and how he, originally signed the letter to FDR to encourage nuclear production before the Germans were able to complete their bomb, and then he ended up spending the rest of his career and his life, in fact, saying that nuclear is terrible, it will be the death of mankind, and Einstein himself decided actually it's not such a good thing after all. So let's learn that final lesson from him. Besides E equals MC squared, he knew a few more things too. So.
Well, this book that John Goffman wrote, I really encourage people to go back and read John Goffman's works, because he wrote some books when he was being ignored, when he realized that the government was going to ignore his studies with Dr. Arthur Tamplin, that they were summarily, they made a choice, honestly. There was an article by Dr. Weinberg, a pro-nuclear scientist, who disagreed with him, and it is a stunning choice that our government made. And they did it really for profit motive, really, honestly. It helped the war machine, and it was profit driven, and that was it. And it became, it's what really, literally, there is the 90% rule. Deny that radiation causes harm, underreport the negative effects of radiation by 90%. Dr. Goffman scientifically studied that. And that's what I call it the 90% rule. He did not. But he said all of his studies point to that whenever he looks at government studies, they want you to underreport the negative effects by 90% and deny that radiation causes harm. That's their MO. And they stick to it to this day. They're still sticking to it.
I am still continuing to be baffled by the fact that 150-pound, typical man is what's used as the model instead of, the most fragile child, because, why wouldn't you want to err on the side of caution? I guess I'm a proponent for the precautionary principle, which is, if you're not sure how harmful something is, then don't use it at all. Don't do tests to determine just how harmful it is. If it's harmful, get rid of it.
That's considered a liberal idea, Wendy. Let's just be clear. That's considered
I'm crazy to think so.
So look, back to this symposium thing. I want to read this because there's going to be a panel. I didn't finish up. I apologize, but I want to give everybody their due at this event because this is going to be an awesome event. Anybody who is near here ought to show up. And this is what the final paragraph says. Following the keynote, which will be Dr. Helen Caldicott at when she finishes speaking at 7 o'clock, a panel of local and national officials will join Dr. Caldicott in a conversation about nuclear waste and its consequences in Missouri and beyond. Panelists will include Denise Brock, Ombudsman of the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, Division of Compensation Analysis and Support, Centers for the CDC Control. That's who she works for. Dr. Sam Page, St. Louis County Councilman, 2nd District, and Mark Harder, St. Louis County Councilman, 7th District. Ray Hartman of St. Louis Magazine and Donnybrook will help further the dialogue among these professionals and an audience of special guest community members, academics, and students. So that's an exciting panel, I thought.
That is a fantastic lineup. I am not personal friends with Ray Hartman, but I feel like I am because he's been such an integral part of St. Louis for so long with St. Louis Magazine and the Riverfront Times. And he has written quite passionately about the poisoned children of Coldwater Creek and how the time is now. We need to not, pass it on. We need to take care of business now. So I know that he is a moral and ethical reporter who I trust very much, and it's actually exciting for me to see that he's going to be on the panel. Denise Brock, as you said, she's the NIOSH ombudsman who enabled legislation for atomic workers in the St. Louis area. She's a fantastic human being. She has done amazing things and was also the focus of the documentary, The Safe Side of the Fence. And her story is really very remarkable. I can't say I'm personally familiar with every person on the panel, but I'm really looking forward to learning from Dr. Caldecott and from the entire experience. I think it'll be really very educational and really important for people to understand the background that the role that St. Louis played in the production of uranium processing during the Cold War and World War II. So
I sure hope you guys have the forethought to remember to ask, how do you guys combat the EPA's comparing natural radiation? Because what you need whenever you come up to these meetings, what they do is they baffle us. You know, like they do this double talk of technical language. So we sit there with our mouths open like, oh, I guess I don't understand this enough. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that complicated. Nuclear radiation is harmful, and the people of St. Louis have been living in a toxic environment for the last 70 years, and our government needs to move the people that are immediately affected. That's about as simple as it gets for me. And I mean immediately affected, buy out all the homes within a 25-mile radius. I mean, even in Hanford, they're not allowed to be 15 miles. They cannot live within 15 miles of the nuclear waste up there.
Well, there's a lot of argument about that because of, the fact that there is a lot of commerce right there in the Bridgeton area. And so when you talk about relocating homes, that's relocating people that have 24-hour exposure, which I'm completely for. I think all of the people that live within that geographic distance need to be relocated immediately because of the emissions that are happening. But there's also the ongoing problem of, Coldwater Creek, where these toxins were originally dumped and then left to blow in the wind for decades. So it's just spread throughout the watershed. So, it's kind of a dual problem that's going on. There's the landfill that has the nuclear waste that has the fire burning next to it. And then there's the polluted creek, which has the uranium from World War II in it. And so, when you say, there's these two issues going on, well, which one is more important? Well, I mean, in my mind, they're equally important. They equal human lives. But then we talk about the difference between acute exposure and chronic exposure. And so with the creek exposure, we're talking about a chronic exposure where people get exposed to a little bit every day, kind of like having an X-ray over and over again and just getting minute amounts until it builds up in your system and bioaccumulates, and then you finally reach critical mass and it becomes a tumor or whatever. And what we're talking about with Coldwater Creek is the fact that there are toxic emissions that are going into the water and coming out into the air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is an emergency situation. We need the brightest and the best, and we need for when someone who is a fire expert is called in to give an opinion, his opinion needs to be granted. It shouldn't be weighed by the people that are going to have to pay for it, by the responsible party. It should be something that safety, would predict what it is going to happen, and that's not what's happened. What's happened is Republic has always taken the cheap way out because, again, I think this is part of their MO. They even just had another landfill that had another landfill fire. So
wait a minute, Wendy. Let me jump in here and ask you about that. That leads me to believe that you've had fire experts say something that has been ignored. Is that correct?
Oh, totally and completely. And besides that, the fire expert, he's a landfill fire expert. That's what he does.
And what does he say? What was the recommendation of what they ought to do?
Well, his recommendation was from several years ago, and it was something that they didn't consider, except that one thing that he said that they should do is to try to mitigate having another surface fire, which they've already had two, which is something that landfills will sometimes have. But these are in the areas where there is radiologically impacted material that is sitting directly on the surface. So just recently they came and took a brush hog and took all of the flammable, I guess, refuse that was on the ground because there had sparked a fire a few months ago. There was an electrical pole that had off-sparked and caused this fire, and before they knew it, they were within feet of this radiologically impacted material and the surface fire.
What did the fire experts say should happen over there?
Well, the one thing that he recommended was to do all of this. He recommended that 2 years ago to take care of the possibility of having the brush fire. And then, as it turns out, because they didn't take his request seriously the first time they had a fire, and then they went ahead and did it after the fact. But he has said all kinds of things about building a barrier and about, I mean, it's a very complex science. He's actually one of just a few people, that has all of the fire and engineering background to understand that, when we're talking about this place, it's a huge, enormous, acres and acres and acres of this giant fire that's going on under the ground. Wow. And then, on top of that, they have an area called the neck, which is the area between where the radiologically impacted material is and where the fire is. And the neck has been getting steadily increasing temperature readings, even though there's all these engineering, solutions, cooling loops and whatnot that are, and extraction wells and whatnot to try to mitigate a problem in the neck area so that it won't go forward. Well, the fact is, all of that has failed. And so then they've also, I believe it was the Attorney General, Chris Koster, who requested that they build some kind of a fire break or a barrier between the radiologically impacted material and the fire. And so far, they have not done that. So far, they came out on December 31st, which was the last day of the year that they, said that they would have an announcement. And their announcement was, we're going to have a barrier. Well, that was actually what was mandated the whole time. We were, then they told us it was going to take 18 months to construct this barrier. The most recent report from Chris Koster, the Attorney General with independent scientific research, says that this fire could hit any time between 3 and 6 months. And that's not even considering the fact that the area where it's currently burning has never been tested for radiologically impacted material, and it's already been known to have migrated off-site.
What do the federal officials say about assisting Republic with getting this barrier built quicker than 18 months? Has anybody asked them about that?
The senators have pretty much tried to distance themselves as much as they can. Now, as you know, they have legislation going forward with House Bill 4100 and Senate Bill 2306. But outside of there being partisan legislation, there is essentially no support because those bills need to sit in committee and get approved by people that do not want to pay for them. So,
just like John Cornyn not wanting to pay for St. Louis pipes to get fixed because that governor installed a city manager that basically overrode any decisions by the city council and destroyed their plumbing. Really, that's essentially what happened. It's so
and with Flint, as much as my heart is sad for these people, bottled water is not the answer. The problem is their entire infrastructure is bad now because of all the lead that is leached in to their water supply. It would require a complete overhaul. So I do see systemic problems, and I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if they should stay and hope that these things will get better.
Wendy, it's interesting that you have those comments because I am saying the same thing about your city. Like, I view both of those cities as those places need to be evacuated. They need to become ghost towns until people can live there again. People need to be just, like when you were mentioning earlier, maybe that's another reason why Governor Nixon cannot acknowledge the contamination in St. Louis, that it would be catastrophic economically. Like, there's the airport right there. There's all those businesses. Those are billions of dollars. That would, could you imagine the state of St. Louis would be busted if that happened?
That's actually what I think is the true fear of all of politicians is that the money impetus will no longer be there. So
Wow.
I believe that St. Louis is worth it. St. Louis is a wonderful place to live and grow up and be a part of. It's a terrific community. And I know that enough people out there care about this issue, and hopefully enough care that are listening to this station right now or listening to this in recording. But everyone needs to come together as one and understand that the pollution and the problems, we weren't responsible for putting it here. It wasn't our mess, but we still are responsible for cleaning it up. So we need to thoroughly research holding those accountable, responsible, and make sure that the people who do have the ability to impact change are the ones that we need to lean on. So,
Yeah. We definitely need to lean on them. I think actually St. Louis needs more than 13,000. If you guys got 100,000, I mean, it's interesting. I find this now, this breaches into another topic, but I think there's, when I looked at the map of where Ferguson was compared to all this nuclear pollution, and we heard about all this racial inequity there and injustice that's happening, I can't help but think that those people live downwind. I can't understand why the black community is not engaged in this. It looks like it's in their neck of the woods. It looks like it's right there. They're within that 25-mile radius that needs to be evacuated. It's astounding.
Well, it's certainly within a close range, and absolutely Ferguson and Berkeley, Kinloch, and the areas that are east of the airport are all vulnerable areas that we would embrace anyone from the black community to come out and support this cause, because they're as impacted by this as we are. It's our air together. It's our water together. This pollution does not discriminate against anyone. So.
Do you know if there's any organizations, any black organizations, organizations of people getting engaged in this? Is there any outreach, or does anybody know? Have you seen many black organizations at the meetings?
Well, I'm not personally aware of any independent organizations. Okay. I do know that Senator McCaskill has what's called kitchen table talks. She has them monthly, or her staff rather. And they encourage the community to come to different places, and they have them all over the place, all over the county. And people come to their local libraries and sit and talk with them about, the issues and things that are bothering them.
So what does Claire McCaskill say about this? Does she understand? I mean, this is what I don't get out of the elected officials. They must think that it's not that big a deal, because they are not jumping up and down and putting pressure on Governor Nixon.
Well, who knows what's happening behind the scenes, but I believe it to be an independent process, because what we're lobbying for to do with federal officials is to have the Army Corps of Engineers food wrap program take over the site. And what we're asking for from Governor Nixon is to have emergency funding dedicated so that we can start to put signs up that say, caution, radiation polluted creek, please do not let your children play here. We don't have anything like that here. And so I think it's that the admission and, seeing signs that would say something like that is what Governor Nixon is turning away from. And I think that Senators Blunt and McCaskill also have their own independent political agendas that they work on that simply rank higher because they, much like the entire process, are greedy. And it's kind of, just follow the money, and then you'll see where their time and their efforts get distributed, and it's pretty consistent. So for as long as McCaskill and Blunt are supportive of nuclear energy and nuclear weapons, then there won't be an end to nuclear. I'm hoping that they will understand. See, we only have one active nuclear plant in Missouri currently, the Callaway County plant in mid-Missouri, and that was never designed to do what it's doing right now. So I'm hoping that they'll get smart and not renew. We have a lot to learn from India. I just saw a news report that said that they were going solar in a big way. And we really need to use solar and wind powers and renewables to get ahead. We can't continue our independence on oil because it's literally ruining our planet. We need to take better care of Mother Earth.
Well, in regards to the nuclear, our Senate just passed a bill. Like, it's going to come up in the new budget bill on the economy. And so if we want to stop that, we have to start calling. Although our elected officials have a deaf ear, because this is my opinion. Now, this is strictly my opinion. I really believe that they're not just greedy. I think they make a decision. I think they're given a choice, because the nuclear industry is run by people who don't care who they kill or what they do. They're going to get what they want. And I think all of our elected officials, they have a choice. They either can get rich or they get dead. Do you want to die or do you want to join the party? I mean, one of your kids will disappear, or you will disappear, or you will get suicided if you come up against this nuclear. They have an agenda that they have not told us, but it's quite apparent that they want this nuclear waste on our planet, because they are not attempting to stop it in any way. All they do is force people to lie and collude, and they're all coerced. That's my opinion. I can't imagine Claire McCaskill in her heart of hearts is going, or even Roy Blunt, as greedy as he is, saying, yeah, we don't care if St. Louis people die. That's just the cost of doing business. I just can't imagine that they're willing to be like that.
Well, I believe they've already been educated about the fact that their drinking water is polluted for St. Louis. But, I guess for somebody being a senator, they have their entire state to look at. And when you consider that Kansas City is actually where the EPA office is located that conducts oversight for the St. Louis Westlake landfill, these people come in once a month to conduct meetings to say, okay, yes, we're going to, have your community engagement meeting. But in the end, all they do is go back to Kansas City, and that's where they live, and that's where they work. So they don't have to deal with this on any personal level in any way, on any daily sense. The people that own the landfill live in Phoenix. So the quality of the air and the water in St. Louis is the least of their problems. They don't care how dirty it gets.
Look, this is what's unconscionable and immoral about what's going on. And people say, well, it's this party or that party, or it's the government. No, it is human beings running this. And part of what we don't have in America is a democracy. When I mentioned that Claire McCaskill, Roy Blunt, and the congressman, now Congress has a lot less power than the Senate. But if these senators really strong-armed Governor Jay Nixon, hey, we want that state of emergency passed. I know that you guys are asking the Senate to pass these bills, and that it's a separate issue from the state of emergency. But the way that it works in the political system is, if those senators wanted a state of emergency passed, it would be passed. Governor Nixon would do it. I mean, because the funding, they could work out a deal so that the state of Missouri, see, the problem is the state of Missouri would have to pick up, I think, a quarter of the tab or 30% of the tab. So they're not interested. This is a freaking sinkhole of money. It's a money pit right there. They start fixing it and remediating it. This is why they've ignored it. It is going to be, it's not just the residents, it's the commerce, it's all of it. And the thought of how gigantic this responsibility is larger than these people have cojones. You know what I mean? Like, they do not actually have the courage to face it. That's why they're not facing it.
That's exactly right. And that is to their, to their criminal detriment, I feel. The people that live in the homes that are, immediately surrounding the landfill, they deserve to be bought out. This shouldn't be a question. Their air quality is terrible, and they know it. And do they really, need to see sick children before they'll do something about it? I don't understand what the delay is, except that they need to grow a conscience, they need to grow a heart, and figure out what's really important. And, it doesn't get more important than human lives. The greed that has taken over, it's the systemic greed problem. You talked about Senator Blunt. Well, I mean, then, his son was the previous governor, and his other son is a lobbyist, and his wife is a lobbyist, and they've made this whole, family issue of lobbying, and I believe the lobbying is not fair to human beings, because then their voices aren't being heard because of the loud voices of the money of the lobbyists. So
it's not,
we need lobbying reform.
Wendy, it's not just money, it's the morality of it all. What they're doing is they're acting like teenagers. Literally, when I say this, they literally are acting like children who are saying, instead of admitting we have created a catastrophe that we don't know how to handle it. Like, that's the conversation that needs to come out of these elected officials. Look, we know that we're not prepared to move everybody out, and we're not prepared to remediate all of this, but we're going to have an honest conversation, and frankly, it's bad. So we're going to give you some safety precautions. We're going to give you masks and screens and oxygen tanks and help you figure out how to protect yourselves. We're going to study how to keep yourself as safe as possible. We're going to put signs up so children don't play in the creeks anymore. And we're sorry, and it's going to take a generation or two before we can get St. Louis back. And that's what has to happen. The conversation has to just be straightforward, accept it, apologize, and move forward and figure out the solution instead of just ignoring it. And I think they underestimate the maturity of the people of St. Louis and the maturity of humanity, because we know it's happening. We don't have to keep sticking our heads in the sand. We need to just face it and say, okay, now instead of putting $54 million digging a hole in North Dakota to bury nuclear waste, let's put $54 million into new research on how to mitigate radiation and how to reverse the negative effects, how to change the molecules back into something that doesn't kill us. They changed the molecules in the first place. They can change them back. And it's not impossible science. I believe that things are possible. It's possible to create. We don't have to just lay down and let the truck run over us. That's what I believe.
No, that's for sure. They set their sights on the moon and decided that they were going to get there before they did it. So I think if we set our sights on, the remediation of the problem, that we will get there eventually. And it's just that we have to do it, and we have to collectively do it. And everyone has to be on the same page in terms of wanting it to be cleaned up. It can't be in the hands of lobbyists that live on the other side of the state that say, no, leave it there, it's safer. That's crazy talk. It needs to not be not be near, people and water. That's the thing. I agree with you about it not going to North Dakota. Really, there is no safe place for it, so I don't know what the answer is to that.
And we really have to call our elected officials and tell them to undo this lie about nuclear energy is safe. It's not safe. Nuclear energy is not safe. It's not clean and safe. It's not going to help us get out of the carbon footprint thing. This whole thing of moving away from fossil fuels to nuclear is suicide. And that's what we need to tell our senators, and we need to all push them and call the president and say, although the president is a nuclear shill, I mean, he totally is pro nuclear. This is the problem that we have. We have a whole industry who has bought out our elected officials. So, Wendy, we're at 8:58 and 30 seconds. We have 30 seconds left. I wanted to thank you for last minute joining us. I hope to get Drew Kuhn on again very shortly when he looks at his schedule again. But I really appreciate you stepping in. This has been a great radio show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lonnie, for everything.
I really appreciate it. Well, I really appreciate your work and your clarity on all of this, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Everybody out there, put your courage feet on, call our elected officials, tell them no to nuclear, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thanks, Lonnie.
Thank you, Wendy.